Welcome to a radical discussion of independence, free will, liberty, and the left-hand path. This is Damon Ossifer with your host, Paul Frederick.
But Gopi Krishna. So I started reading his that Evolutionary Energy in Man book, and so the first thing that stood out to me is that his narrative about his experience is so visceral and so colorful.
He's a great writer.
Right.
Which is amazing for somebody, he's like Joseph Conrad was I think he was a German or an Austrian, and he wrote in English, just a masterful writer. And Gopi Krishna is a great writer, the foremost writer researcher on Kundalini in the 20th century. But he died in, I think, 85 or something like that. But yeah, go ahead.
But I wanted to ask you about Gopi Krishna. What you said that you met him. What was your experience of meeting him?
Well, my wife and I went to Kashmir in 1977, and we stayed on a houseboat on Dal Lake, run by this Indian guy or Kashmiri guy his father had been in the Pakistani or in the Indian Army, and was official, and so he inherited this boat, and he did everything. He was like the most incredible guy, and so I had come there. Really, I'd gotten my wife to agree to go there if we could visit certain places, and that she would agree to my meeting with Gopi Krishna. And so I asked him, can you get me an appointment with Gopi Krishna? And he said he had no idea who Gopi Krishna was, but he had the connection. So about 3 days later, a cousin of his rows up to the boat and says, I have your appointment. He's over there, and here's how to get there. And so I took a taxi there. And he had a beautiful house on a small hill, and I'm sitting in there, and it was, in retrospect, I was really stupid not to bring a camera or a tape recorder or something, although, the technology was definitely not the same at that time as it is now. So he walks into the room, and I'm sitting, and he sits down and faces me, and he says, "Well," and so then I told him my whole story about the base of the spine, about the energy, about the sesame seed, about the ejaculating, and so he basically, we did talk about a lot of things, but basically he gave me a kind of guide to living with Kundalini from his experience, like don't do this, don't do that, ultimately saying in the end that Kundalini is intelligent and will tell you what to avoid and what to go for in terms of eating or, associating or everything. Don't associate with bad people, and think free. All those kind of things that are kind of self-evident. And then I went back to the boat. We took a taxi back to the boat after looking at the gardens, and but I went on to read most of his books, and I even got some of his books that were only published in India while I was there. And he was a scientist, really. He wasn't a religious person, and one of the things he said in one of his books was that during the time, and when he activated Kundalini in 1938, the year of my birth, he had gone around to all these gurus and people and asked them if they knew anything about Kundalini. And he said in India, a country renowned for its spirituality, he found no one. He said he was more likely to find something, advice from a rickshaw driver or a boatsman than he was from some exalted guru, which I found, which kind of verified or endorsed my position on not needing a teacher, because why study with somebody that's because immediately, unless they've actually had that same experience, what good are they? I mean, they can tell you, you know, they can keep you from drinking whiskey maybe, but not much else. So it's almost yeah, and like I said, every Kundalini experience is different. So it's almost normal or essential that you go this experience by yourself. And it is whether you're working with a teacher, it's still you with your body, with this introducing into your body this hidden, dormant physiological phenomena, and thinking that it's going to kill you, or its intentions are evil, or none of that is true. Its intentions are benign, and you're left to discover what these are by listening to it and not trying to fight it. And a lot of people I do talk to fight it or cry about it or don't or curse it or say, and I said, well, you're not going to change it. You can't walk it back. I could no more go back to the day before I started to work on it, unbeknownst to what was going to happen, that I can insert myself into my mother's body and be born again.
So, this is where the Kundalini, where this discussion, it starts to sound like a thing that you hear about in other systems, like the Greeks talked about the daemon, which is kind of where the idea of the show, my podcast here, Daemonosophy, the idea that you have a higher self, or a self ahead of the self. And Aleister Crowley of the Golden Dawn, they talked about the holy guardian angel. And the ancient Zoroastrians called it the Fravashi, the idea that you have a holy guardian angel. And the thing is, though, that all these systems, no one gives any kind of methodology for how to interact or unlock or communicate with something like that. Like maybe there's a collection of like magic spells or something that you do, or maybe you pray a lot, or maybe someone says, hey, I'm just lucky my higher self is talking to me and doing this, and you never know if it's bullshit or not. But as far as like an individual wanting to like connect with something like that, there's not any really good methodology for it, other than I feel like this golden flower technology and what you're talking about in here, what Gopi Krishna is talking about, that's really the tech. And again, like what Gurdjieff, had dropped all these hints about, that's the closest thing, and that really the way to this, the method is actually pretty simple. It's actually pretty simple, but it's a matter of making some choices about where you're going to put your attention.
Yeah, just as an aside, going back to Gopi Krishna, once I read his book, I said, I don't know when, I don't know where, I don't know how, but I'm going to write a book using his same approach, but specifically tailored to Westerners. And that's what deciphering the what is it called?
Golden
Deciphering the golden. See, my memories. One secret at a time. Yeah. That's what I attempted to say. Okay, this is. We have to discover our own approach to spiritual phenomena and a spirituality and metaphysical practices. We can't just we can never build on top of what Easterners build on to. We have to start from scratch on our own. It's almost like economics, like Africa will never get to its highest point while it's still being governed by European countries, whether they're actually there or not. They still hold sway economically over it. So spiritually, we have to build our own tradition of spiritual and metaphysical practices. And that's what I've tried to do in all my books, is to say, start from scratch. Don't be afraid. Don't get hooked up with a so-called guru when you can possibly do what you're looking for on your own, and you won't be influenced by all these. When I did it, I had no influences. I had the secret of the golden flower, and that was it. And my brain and I made a lot of possibly wrong choices, but now I talk to people and do consultations for people who are studying and working on 10 different things. And I say, why can't you just take one and do it? And if you find my method useful, we'll try it. If you don't, take another one, but stick to one. And they're doing things like some breathing, different types of breathing exercises, different types of yoga exercises, where I say everything begins with breath. That's the secret, is you work on the breath, get the diaphragm going, and do it regularly. And you were talking about, you had those breath experiences. Well, how it worked for me is I was in a very quiet room in this house in the south of France, and I felt that I was no longer breathing me. It was breathing me, like the room was breathing me, like the cosmos was breathing me. So when you get these feelings that differ from your ordinary life's experience, you're somewhere. And then you'll have these sensations where you can pinpoint energy centers and something happening there. And that's sort of what it takes, is just your effort, you alone. Don't worry about, read some books, but don't start on 10 different techniques.
And do you, in your personal practice, do you do a daily sitting meditation, like every day for a
Well,
certain amount of time? Or
I lie down. The energy builds up. It's active 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the last 55 years. Since it happened, since that point of, that one night where it just all came into my brain and started this, directing traffic in this hidden network. And I could do nothing. So I learned very quickly, I'm just going to sit back and watch it. But so I lie down at about 5:30 in the evening, and I watch it. And I don't do it, it does me. So I don't do any meditation. I just formal like I used to. I don't sit in a lotus. It's always doing me, but it's more intense at that time when I just, and what it's trying to do is, if you do this, like, and this simple exercise of pulling your arms, you can feel yourself being pulled apart, because everything. The point of the secret of the golden flower is to learn to center yourself, and while breathing. And so when you're lying down, when I'm lying down, sometimes I can separate from my coccyx back there by just pulling it apart, and the energy flows more evenly in there. But I don't do anything, crazy, and I don't do. I always breathe through the nose. That's one thing that I've been. It's been important for me, is to breathe the right way. And there's a guy came out. This guy named James. James something. It's anyway. The book is called Breath, and he's made a study of breathing and different techniques and the effect that breath has on our physiognomy. And it's a very interesting book, because we do have a lot of breath-related illnesses right now. So it all starts with breath, but if you're going to do it, why not get an assessment of the way you breathe right now before starting, so you know whether you have to make up in getting to normal breathing. You may have to do some preliminary exercises just to get to the starting point, the right starting point that you should be in if, as a child, you'd grown up. And because a lot of this is damage to breathing process is psychological through some sort of bad experience or trauma. Children start breathing the wrong way because they get frightened and they tense up, and instead they implode. They begin to physically implode, and the breathing chamber reflects this. It's the first thing to go. And there's a portion in this book talking about a dentist who discovered that through a scan of this dimensions, like 15 centimeters by 15 centimeters of this is a deep scan. It'll show the configuration of your breathing, and if you're breathing wrong. And then he develops a denture type device that you wear that will actually put your teeth in the right, and your jaw and your sinuses and every part of your and there's a chapter in the book Breath on this doctor, this dentist, Belfour, I think his name is. So it's worth reading, especially if somebody wanted to go into this work and they don't know where to begin. Well, you could begin with the breathing, but if there's something wrong with your breathing, then you gotta do the remedial work to fix that.
Yeah, and I think I was reading just this morning. I was going through the Cleary version of the Golden Flower, and I think it's a statement in there that the breath there's a connection between the breath and the mind. They're like there's like a direct sort of connection there. So it's like if you slow down, your breath, the mind will automatically like slow down in response to it. Or if you're breathing heavily, your mind like speeds up and all your physiology like speeds up. So that is the window into how, by controlling and slowing down the breath, that helps quiet the stream of associations in the mind that are such a distraction to attention.
Yeah, that's in the method that on my website that I enumerate. I try to deal with that, at least what worked for me is that, and the Secret of Golden Flower has a great name for that, and they call it the 10,000 things. And you've just been describing it yourself, how difficult it is to deal with that. And basically, in this Secret of Golden Flower, there's some suggestions, but I found that just counting while I breathe in a rhythmic way is like 1, 2, 3, 4. And I did a lot of walking in Paris, long distance, and I do 1, 2, 3, 4 inhale while I was doing 4 paces. 1, 2, 3, 4 hold. 1, 2, 3, 4 exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4 hold. Start over, and just always through the nose, and until the diaphragm is really working. And but what I found out is less is, well, when you sit in a quiet room so quiet that you can hear yourself breathing, inhaling and exhaling, the thing to do is to get to the point where you're in that room and you cannot hear yourself breathing. Then you know that you're doing it the right way. You're taking in more air. You're using the diaphragm. You're filling the pockets behind the kidneys, not just the lungs. Superficial breathing, and that's the machinery. Again, use this esoteric machinery image that starts the distilling of energy.
I found that part so interesting. The thing about the quieting of breath, that's one thing I read in the Golden Flower, and just okay, I don't know what that is, and I just went by it. And then your discussion of it started to really trigger a lot more thought for me. And one of the things I thought of is there's a famous passage by Gurdjieff where he talks about one of the unnoticed or unexpected benefits to sitting quiet and still with good posture is that it starts to exercise and build what he called the small muscles, right? And so people can talk about what he meant by small muscles, but it probably is something like, well, it's the parts of the muscles that the parts of your physiognomy that are atrophied from all of the wrong, unconscious, habitual behaviors that we carry on in life, and that also aren't touched if we just by going to the gym and lifting a bunch of weights or running and stuff. These muscles don't get done either. And I think everyone, when they first start trying to do a regular sitting or meditation, that's the biggest problem anyone has is, oh my God, my back is killing me. Actually sitting still is probably the hardest thing to do for most people. It's like our muscles, it asks you to use muscles that you've never even heard of before. And I know I kind of jumped into this from silent breath. But one thing I noticed with silent breath, that effort to keep your breath silent, it's all of a sudden totally different muscles around your breath are moving around the diaphragm. It calls for something totally different versus the intuitive thing to do when you're breathing out is to do it real strong, strong outward breath that's really loud.
Yeah, the activity. I mean, there again, in our civilization, we think that going to the gym and becoming muscular is. I mean, it's just kind of like gladiators. We're more than gladiators, and these are counterproductive, really, because people take these supplements with it, and less is more. I mean, the body is supposed to be more like when you see the Greek statues, nobody's nobody's muscle bound. And I think too, in terms of sports, from my, I followed baseball when I was a very young age, and they had guys like Eddie Stanky, the New York Giants, he looked like a guy that hung out in a pub or a bar, and now these guys are all pumped up, and there's a lot more injuries because they've overextended their muscular possibilities. They've stretched them, and so when they take that extra leap towards first base, that one last thing, they sprain the groin and they're out for 6 months. And that didn't happen when it had a lot of kind of guys that looked like everybody else, like average human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. So silent breath. That's one thing that I noted here. Here, I'm going to give you some other thoughts. And these are some of my my thoughts from Golden Flower that I jotted down. When they talk about the primal spirit in there, and this is Wilhelm. This is my Wilhelm translation notes. He talks about primal spirit.
And the conscious spirit.
Yeah. So I thought that corresponds with, like we said, like higher self or the daemon or something like that, right? But I know some people will take that and interpret it as God, and maybe those are the same thing, or maybe there's some kind of similarity. But what are your thoughts on the primal spirit?
Uh, it's, I would say, it's that consciousness as opposed to the conscious spirit. It's too bad that the conscious spirit is the ego, and that's what it is for me. Is that that when you're born, well, the primal spirit is in command, or Kundalini, in your prenatal, or even before conception, and I deal with that in the Deciphering the Golden Flower, One Secret at a Time. So you're as soon as you're born, the conscious spirit takes control, and it's only after rediscovering through whatever it is that you reawaken the primal spirit. Kundalini reawakens the primal spirit, but that conscious spirit is like the senses. That's what it is. It's like the baby's taking in all this stuff that's been in the dark of a womb, just like materializing itself and becoming from little seed to matter, and then it comes out into the world, and and unlike a cat or a kitten, it's got its eyes open, and it's touching, feeling, sensing, looking all around, and takes in all these things and tries to make sense of them. And the primal spirit is buried away and forgotten about until, well, maybe never. And that's the tragedy, is that instead of working on reestablishing or reawakening the primal spirit, you go to a football game, or you go to to Vegas. People speak about Vegas as if it's Jerusalem or something in a biblical that it's all of experience. Anything worth experiencing is in Vegas. Well, I mean, I've been there and I hated it. I mean, it's just a dust bowl. There are no sidewalks or no nothing. It's like you're just in one thing, and you go to another, and you're lost in it.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. So let me ask you this with regard to this idea of the primal spirit, and I agree with what you said there. I think I agree with that. The conscious spirit, that's referring to kind of your regular consciousness, your ordinary consciousness, and then that primal spirit, that's like your higher consciousness, that you're kind of your initial falling into this world, you're cut off from that,
well, it's almost like in mythological terms, it's this force that's saying, pushing away the conscious spirit, pushing away the ego, saying life is not the ego, is not what your ego perceives or thinks of you or tries to establish as the real you. You are you, and you've got to look for you in other places than in Vegas or, Talladega or the corner bar.
Right. So then,
and I think I've had I've had a long life, and a life that's done many things, made many mistakes, and would I have, if I had the capability of turning off Kundalini and never starting it, would I agree to do that? knowing that it's changed my life in so many ways. Not all the way that my ego might have wanted it. And all I can say is I've used my body as a laboratory. I'm an experiment. And others are experimenting also around us, around you and I, as we are experimenting. Will this change the course of evolution? All these people doing this, I'm not sure. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll speed things up, fast track. Make Kundalini ready for prime time. I'm not sure.
Or is it possible that it's only for the few?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the march towards consciousness is inevitable. I mean, that's unless we destroy ourselves, which is very possible, because we're doing more things for selfish reasons than we are for the good of mankind. It's very, very interesting to read books about the founding fathers of the United States, Jefferson, Washington, Madison, and how their whole thing was to be successful against the British, we have to defer our own desires, and we have to cooperate, we have to sacrifice. And they all wondered, like, after this war, will we continue to make these sacrifices as a people? If not, we are doomed. We will not succeed because our form of government is too prone to authoritarianism if the wrong things, the wrong chemistry, or other occurrences come together. Mm-hmm. So these are things of consciousness. Consciousness rules. Consciousness rules everyday life.